what a joy it is to be here in this room with all of you. As Matt mentioned, since 2006, I've had some role that's been a part of this team, and I really enjoyed. Fast forward, or rewind to my first job out of college. In 1999, to date myself, I was very lucky to get to work for an early .com that was focused on using technology and internet to connect artisans from around the world with global consumers. And I was the first hire outside of the family. The two founders happened to be brothers from Stanford. And I was hooked by this process of going from zero to, from 2 country offices and just one angel funding through the organization's first round of institutional funding and its expansion to 10 offices around the world, and all of the kind of scrappy early stage work that I got to do behind the scenes of these 2 founders and their idea. And at that really formative stage in my career, it kind of got me just like so inspired by how market forces could be channeled to uplift livelihoods and create new opportunities for people and spark relationships that could, supersede boundaries and cross the world. And so then, many, many years later, when I had the opportunity to come to CSI, it had been a place where I feel like I was honoring that early formative experience in getting to work with more students throughout the years as they all get to, make their ideas come into fruition. And I feel so thankful that I worked with 5 different directors over the course of 18 years as a part of this organization, and gotten to kind of watch, folks go from kind of the early stage ideas like Doug and Zoe up to the kinds of accomplishments that you're going to get to hear about today. And I'm especially passionate about the leadership evolution that happens in individuals when they really have the opportunity to honor what they're passionate about and listen to their deepest values. I feel very thankful that in my job, I get to do something that I feel useful. I feel a deep sense of purpose. And I've been gifted with some of the most meaningful relationships with people who I respect and admire. And I work with them every day. So I get to have conversations like this all the time. And I'm so glad that I get to now do this in front of all of you. And I can't wait for you to get to meet Heejae Lim, Jim Thompson, Nedjip Tozun, and Jenny Shia Spradling. And they'll get to tell you a bit more about their leadership journeys and the learnings that they've had along the way, and ideally some little insights for you. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, but at big forgiveness in advance if I have to add some accolade or accomplishment that you might leave off of the list. And then we'll jump in. So Heejae, would you mind introducing yourself to start?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Heejae Lim. I'm the founder and CEO of TalkingPoints. I graduated from the GSB in 2015. And do we do the org intro too? Yeah. And TalkingPoints, TalkingPoints is an education technology nonprofit, and our mission is to unlock the potential of families in being more engaged in their children's education, especially in under-resourced communities. I started TalkingPoints while at the GSB. It really stemmed from my personal experience growing up. So I was an English language learner student. I'm Korean, and then my family moved when I was 8 to the suburbs of London in England, hence my weird accent. You can't quite place. And my mom really became kind of a parent spokesperson, translator, communicator, the parent leader. It was a very Korean immigrant-heavy community that my public elementary school was in. It was called Robin Hood Primary School. And I saw the impact that she had on me and my sister's education, hence kind of that it really informed TalkingPoints. And then I came to the GSB, and there were a few moments like the D School class, which was innovation and education. I went to a parent focus group in East Palo Alto, and you're talking to a woman who applied to the GSB, not knowing Stanford was actually in Palo Alto, not San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know what East Palo Alto was like. And, when I walked into that school building, I think it was a middle school, it really reminded me of the school that, I attended. And 80% of the parents who turned up at this parent focus group was Spanish-speaking parents. I turned up without a translator because no one gave me the heads up. I was a lone student, and that really kind of just inspired me to start TalkingPoints. And then a couple of sparks while I was at the GSB. I think the D School class, I also took Startup Garage. So Ross, I see you sitting here. You're one of my professors with Matt Glickman. The late Bill Meehan and Gloria Lee was some of my professors. And then I begged Gloria, who used to run U School's venture fund, she was the president at the time, to take in the Smith funding to bring me in as summer EIR. I think it was technically bending the rules, but I was entrepreneurial. And that really got us the prototype of Talking Points. And I can share a little later what it really does as well.
Thank you so much, Heejae. And that entrepreneurial spirit actually then seeded the idea for IDIF, which later we were able to properly fund entrepreneurial students. So clever and good job. And for those of you who are interested, Heejae has a fantastic TED Talk. She was a TED Fellow. There are 71.4 thousand viewers last I saw, which was yesterday, Heejae, in case you didn't know. The title of that talk is called The Most Powerful Yet Overlooked Resource in Schools. And it's specifically about the work that Heejae and the Talking Points team have done to kind of uncover the power of family engagement. Jim, would you please introduce yourself as well, both the PNP chapter and then your kind of entrepreneurial effort since then?
Yeah, I hate to mention what year I graduated in because a long time ago. In fact, probably before some of you were born. But I became the director of the public management program. And Jim Patel was my associate dean. He had a reputation that terrified a lot of people. He was a great teacher. And I had a different accounting professor who was a first year. Jim terrified a lot of people, and including me. So me too. When I found out that the PMP director position was open, I called him up and I said, I'm Jim Thompson, class of 86. I'm interested in the PMP director position. And there was silence at the other end. But anyway, I got an interview, and let me jump ahead a little bit. What Jim and I came up with was a way to, I don't know if revitalize is the right word, but to rethink for the public management program. It had been had a focus on government jobs. And the idea R.J. Miller had originally was to get business type people to go into government because he saw how much government needed when he was in Detroit. And Jim and I decided that we were going to make a switch and move it away from jobs to leadership and public service. And so part of the strategy was to invite a whole bunch of really dynamic social entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and let people know that this is an option. It's a really exciting option. I hosted most of these people. And Jim March, who passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, he didn't believe in the economic theory of decision-making. He believed that people made decisions based on who they were, who they thought they were, and who they wanted to be. And so identity was key. And I realized as Bill Drayton and many of these people came through to visit that I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be a social entrepreneur. So that became my identity and quest.
Thank you so much, Jim. And we'll talk a little bit about the impact of Positive Coaching Alliance next, but will you just talk about that transition into setting that up?
I got all carried away. Thanks.
Tell them a little more about it in the next question. So, okay. Well, so Jim went on to start Positive Coaching Alliance, which we'll learn a little bit more about because we're so lucky to have him both in the historical context about PNP and then also talking about this adventure that you built and the new things that you're working on.
Thanks.
You bet. Then would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, and we have some, our founding story has some links with Jim Patel, so I'll refer to him as well. Mm-hmm. But so d.light exists to serve the 2 billion people without access to reliable electricity in the world. And we started in 2007. I was a class of '07. So that's, all right, Darren.
Yes.
So, we have a lot of our origin story very much links to Stanford, the PMP program. There's a lot of amazing support we got here to get d.light off the ground. So the company was inspired from my business partner's time living in Benin before he came to business school. He was in Peace Corps and basically was living in a village without electricity. And his neighbor's son was burned in a kerosene accident. And this boy was totally burned, ended up surviving, but took months to recover. And Sam had that experience and realized that this is really an injustice, that it's the 21st century. And yet you have about 1 billion people with no access to electricity at all. And then another 1 billion plus people where they have an electric connection, but it's very unreliable. And I had gone to Stanford in the business school specifically because of the design for extreme affordability class at the D school. I heard about it. It was a young program at the time. It was like, I think, a couple years in. And Jim Patel had founded it, or it was one of the co-founders of that class. So my first year of business school, I applied to get into the class and I didn't get in. I know. And I thought the universe is not making sense. So I just kept showing up to the class over and over again. They finally let me in after like 4 or 5 weeks. But I never figured out if I was on the good side or bad side of Jim Patel, like we were talking about it. I think it ended up on the good side after a couple of years at least. So anyway, that's where I met Sam. We partnered up and got like amazing kind of platform with the extreme affordability program to start research into this space. Then the second year, we got just resources all over the school and just fellow students that were helping us sort of like develop this venture. I had a chance to go on one of these social innovation trips to Brazil and met this amazing entrepreneur named Fabio Rosa, who's doing off-grid electrification in Brazil. Just got really inspired and realized like, we can do this. It's something that we can do. And there just weren't companies that were doing this. And we felt like if we didn't do it, no one's going to do it. So by the time we graduated, raised a little bit of seed money, won a couple of business plan competitions. And basically I moved to China to figure out how do we make this stuff affordably and high quality. And Sam moved to India, which was our first market, figure out how in the world are we going to sell and distribute. And that was the beginning of our journey. And it's been quite an adventure since then.
Yeah. And we're going to spotlight again your impact kind of, it had the conversation proceed, but Ned was just named this week one of Time 100 climate list on like leaders pioneering sustainability. And thank you. So good.
Jenny. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny. I love being back here. Does anyone else just like walk on the campus and go like, anything's possible? I feel that every time I'm here. Co-founder of FreeWill. CSI and Stanford were a huge part of our founding journey. It all started with an illicit, before we were supposed to make student clubs meet up with my co-founder who set that up. So I met him here. I came to Stanford because of CSI. It was Stanford or bust. And we got IDA funding, all the sorts of things. But what is FreeWill? FreeWill is now the largest provider of estate planning in the world. It makes it very easy for people to do their estate planning and leave money to charity in those estate plans. So we've done over $10 billion in commitments, 1 million people who have their families protected through estate planning, and more to go.
Great. So let's just do like a rapid, the impact you're the most proud of, kind of reverse order. You almost set that up, Jenny, but if there's anything else that you want to add onto this, like the, current count of partners that are nonprofits or
happy to. I mean, our business model is serving nonprofits. They're paying customers. We have over 1,600 paying customers, 200 people now on the team. It's been a great growth story.
Great. Ned?
Yeah. So over the 17 years, we are now selling our products in over 70 countries. There's 180 million people who have got energy access through d.light products. And we've offset a total of 40 million tons of CO2, which is the annual emissions of Norway. So we're working on building up to bigger country sizes, but Norway's a good start.
With Positive Coaching Alliance, I've been retired for about 5 years now, and I say I'm retired in the sense that nobody's paying me to do anything. The last year I was the CEO of Positive Coaching Alliance. We did 3,500 live workshops around the country. If you had 360 days, that's almost one a day. I think that this is much harder. Bill Meehan used to say that everything that can be measured does not matter, and everything that matters can't be measured. And this is a hard one, but I think we changed a sea change to youth sports. Anybody remember, like 20-some years ago, who the predominant coach was in the country? Bobby Knight, that's right. And from Bobby Knight, we've gone to Steve Kerr. And I think just a lot of knowledge about how you get the best out of people. So it's hard to take credit for that, but I feel like we made a little bit of it.
Thank you. For us, I'm really proud of our scale. So this year, the school year will serve 5 million students' families across the U.S. in K-12 school districts. We've just, as of 2 weeks ago, just broken 1 billion interaction and communication points between families and schools. But I think my most proud impact is we've done several efficacy studies, third party, and it shows that the adoption of talking points, the schools that adopt talking points versus not, so it's quasi-experimental, shows 9 additional months of learning time for students and a 24% decrease in absenteeism, which is a huge pressing issue, especially post-COVID. Yeah.
No. So fantastic. Thank you, all of you. Let's jump into a little bit more about kind of the highs and lows of this leadership journey. I mean, it's almost self-evident that choosing to start a venture that's tackling an intractable social or environmental problem is not going to be easy. It's hard to launch any company, even if you're selling, an addictive product, let's say. But in this case, you're like pushing against forces that are going to be working against you. And often you're choosing the thing you want to work on because it's personal to you in some way. It like taps into something that you care deeply about that can be especially exhausting or depleting. And so I'm just, I've witnessed it. Many leaders burn out along the way. And I know you all have peers who have had that happen. So I'd love to hear an example of a low point and then sharing a little bit about how you got through it. And Nedjip, if you would mind.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think when we started 17 years ago, we kind of have imagined all the crazy ups and downs, near-death experiences along the way, and just how much of a marathon it was going to be rather than just a pure sprint. And I think we also didn't appreciate when we started the business, and we were so focused on making amazing products for people and had this kind of naive notion, making a great product at the great price, it's just going to sell everywhere as long as it's a better value for money than kerosene. But we eventually realized that was critical, but not sufficient. We also actually ended up having to build last mile distribution, sort of create the market because there wasn't a lot of awareness for solar, especially in rural communities, which are very risk averse and not necessarily typically first adopters for new technology. And then as we innovated up to larger solar home systems and appliances to really enable these families to leapfrog the grid to having a connected home, we had to figure out financing to these customers. They were unbanked. Microfinance organizations weren't even willing to finance to our customers. So, all these things in our head, we were like, oh, we could partner with distributors. We could partner with microfinance. We ended up having to build it all ourselves. So we were building like almost 3 distinct major companies. And if one failed, the whole thing would fail. So it was a high pressure and living in a different country. We didn't speak the language. So it was a lot. And plus it was like a personal mission. So that just ups the stakes even more. So there were multiple times along the way where I burned out, or came very, very close to burning out. And I'm really glad I had a great business partner in Sam. We can kind of commiserate with each other about it. But, I think that one of the things I realized on a personal level is that, so we work a lot with rechargeable batteries. I give this analogy sometimes. So, solar products, you charge up the battery and you recharge it with the solar panel. But human beings, I believe, are a bit like rechargeable batteries. Because you have to put something in a circuit called deep discharge protection when you're dealing with batteries. So when you deplete the battery, basically the circuit cuts off the battery when it gets to a certain level, and then you can't deplete it anymore. You have to recharge it. But if you don't put that in the circuit, you keep sucking energy out of the battery, and it looks like it's working. But actually, you are damaging the battery. You're deep discharging it, and when you try to recharge it, it never goes full again, and you damage your battery. And I think human beings can be like that. We can sprint for a while, but if you're constantly sprinting and constantly taking energy out of that battery and you're not replenishing it in some way, it can lead to burnout. And I think I never really learned this first 5-6 years, especially, how to have that level of balance. And, then over time, through honestly, like good counsel from family, friends, Sam, my business partner, figured out ways to kind of recharge me. I mean, that was time with family, time with friends, music, hiking, spiritual stuff. It kind of looks different for everybody, but figured out what it looked like for me so I could properly recharge and be in it for the long run, because actually creating this kind of change takes hard work and effort, and you have to be there for the long run. So I always encourage social entrepreneurs, especially, or entrepreneurs that impact, this is a long journey. You got to make sure you're in it for the long run. And then there's other management stuff. Like I didn't have enough senior people that I could delegate to. I was too much in the details. So that was also burning me out. So I learned from a management level as I kind of grew that what worked for me in the early days, I had to evolve as a leader to be able to bring on great leaders, delegate more, sometimes get into the details if necessary, but learn how to fly at the right elevation. So I think it's kind of a learning journey for me over time. That's also helped.
Thank you. Do we have any comments, something you agree with or disagree with that you heard?
Or disagree.
Jim.
Yeah. Right after I started Positive Coaching Alliance, I started talking to the people I knew who were wealthy or knew people who were wealthy. And I got a meeting with a major donor in the Bay Area just before Christmas. And I asked him I don't remember how much I asked him for, but he said he would give me 3 years at $50,000 a year. And as I was driving home, I was thinking, wow, isn't that great? And had the worst Christmas of my life because crap, now I had to do it. And one of the things that really helped me with Positive Coaching Alliance is we were research-based. And one of the ideas we came across was emotional tanks. Because I'm working on climate change now, I talk about emotional batteries. And being surrounded with people who fill your tank, people who, when you see them, they smile at you, made such a difference. And even people who were really good at their job, if they weren't good at filling emotional tanks, it didn't work out. So,
Thanks so much, Jim. And Jenny, you said this at one point in our call. You said, actually caring about the impact of your company. It's a powerful antidote for the 7-year founder itch.
Yes, very true. Yeah, I mean, amongst this room, there was a period of time in which, Pash and I were really thinking, we've been at it for 7 years, or GSB 18. Is it time? All the other 7-year founders seem to have sold their companies, and have done something. Is it time? I feel itchy. And I think the biggest thing that kept us in it is just sort of well, if we do that next phase of growth, what crazy impact could we achieve? And if we don't do it, no one else is going to. So that really keeps you going.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Heejae, you want to add in on how COVID in particular affected TalkingPoints?
Well, I heard this analogy, and I can't remember who was saying it, but resilience in life is you got to learn surfing. I'm not a surfer, but I've been surfing in Pacifica. And I think about external factors in an organization, you got to learn to ride them. You got to learn to ride them. You have to learn to enjoy riding them. You have to use them to go to the direction you've always wanted to go. And there might be times you're kind of dunked under, and then you got to protect yourself. So I feel like all these changes, like the election, the new administration, policy changes, and COVID, we see them very similarly as opportunities. So when COVID hit in March 2020, we were a team of 10 people, of which 2 were actually Stanford CAS fellows. So they're undergrads just having graduated. So not really full professional, members of the organization yet. One employee was on maternity leave. And at the time, our focus was on our free product. So TalkingPoints is a universal family engagement platform. It allows for two-way translated communication between families and school districts with more content and capacity coaching to lead them to best practices. So you can imagine how COVID really necessitated a huge demand for talking points literally overnight. So very similarly, I think, we had thousands of teachers signing up every morning, and basically our website crashed. Our head of engineering, who had said, "Oh, we're absolutely ready for 10x scale." Absolutely. Like, we crashed every day. And it was just really hard to keep up. But I think that kind of made us a lot stronger in terms of building our infrastructure, building our ability to manage scale. There were school districts, calling me personally. I don't know how they got my number at 10 p.m. in Pacific. By the way, they were on the East Coast, saying, we need to give access to all schools, the access to the Talking Points platform, and for free. We were charging for school districts at the time. So what we did was we ended up fundraising philanthropically and giving access for free to Talking Points for Title I school districts. And in the end, 2 years later, they ended up converting as a fully paying school district customer. So I think kind of that relationship building and really using it as an opportunity went a long way. And we also use it as an opportunity to actually change our business model to more focus on our paying licensed products to school districts. So now we've built a go-to-market function, a marketing and sales team. We didn't have any employees focused on marketing and sales at the time, but our sales through COVID 10x'd in a period of, I think, 9 months without a full-time employee. So we wanted to use that as an opportunity. And then I think going forward, we don't know what the policy environment's going to look like, especially in the education space. And if you read the news last night, I think Secretary of Education was chosen. It's a really weird pick. Like, I've seen the documentary on Mr. Mahan. I just finished it. Little did I imagine a character from that documentary would appear in the New York Times as the education secretary pick. But the point is, I think family engagement as an issue is something that really both extreme ends of the political spectrum can actually align on. It's one of the few issues in education, and we want to use that as an opportunity to grow and accelerate our impact and kind of really leverage it. So, yeah, we're gonna surf those waves. The waves are coming.
Yeah. Related to this topic is that you're all talking about how you move beyond the immediate tactical incoming thing into your inbox to lift your head up, look at the horizon, right? Look at the big swell that's coming your way. And the topic of our panel is scaling impact. You're all here because you built something that has shaped a field, has really pioneered new possibilities for people. But it's hard to do that. It's really hard to shift from tactical immediate items to kind of changing the rules of the game. And I'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts on, how you did that and what steps you've taken towards impact at scale. And Ned, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off.
Yeah. As we were starting to grow and develop a market for these kinds of distributed solar solutions in the markets you worked in, we were kind of working a bit under the radar when it came to the governments weren't really paying attention to us. And we were just growing. But as we were getting a certain scale and other companies started coming into the space, we realized that it was going to be important to advocate for ourselves at some of these governmental levels. For one thing, from some state, governments were starting to talk about putting in standards for solar, but you had all these kinds of potentially bespoke standards in every single country, which would have been the logistical nightmare for us to deal with. You had every company sort of reporting impact in different ways, which was creating a lot of confusion. And then you had different sort of customs duty policies in these governments. And it was very difficult for us as an individual company to advocate with these governments. Sometimes there's corruption involved in these, we just didn't want to be touching those relationships necessarily directly. So we helped form an industry association. We work with our competition and also some other stakeholders like the World Bank and the IFC, who already were collaborating with these governments in above board ways to figure out how do we make a good advocacy for policy. And for us, we weren't looking for subsidy or handouts necessarily from the governments. Really, we just wanted an even playing field with kerosene, with diesel that is powering the diesel generators. Because we believe if there was a level playing field, we would ultimately win, or solar would ultimately win. But we just wanted to avoid having these sort of distorted effects in the market, as the governments maybe saw this as a potential to get revenue or to like take a cut of this kind of burgeoning industry, which is also having a massive positive impact on their citizens. So there's just a need to sort of make that advocacy for our space, but wasn't something we could necessarily do alone. So we helped co-found this industry association. It was about 13 years ago now that got kicked off. And, got, like I said, the World Bank and IFC involved because they already had these relationships and developed some of those standards. And, we're able to sort of be proactive in sort of advocating for ourselves, advocating what's a good quality product and sort of educating these governmental officials so we can make sure the industry can mature in a healthy way. So that was.
What was the name of this industry group?
It's called the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, which is a little misnamed now because it's so much more than just lighting, but that's sort of ended up sticking.
Cool.
But that's there's about 200 members now of that association, both companies, but also some of these non-government organizations and multilateral institutions. So I think that was something as we grew and got to a certain scale, and as we were starting to impact millions of people, we realized we really had to be proactive on that front or be at the whims of what might happen to us in these markets.
Thanks so much, Ned. And I'm just going to call out a couple of things that have come earlier. You're talking so much about the studies that you've done, like kind of framing the language around family engagement and pioneering like awareness about how important and pivotal it is and outcomes. And Jim, you talked about the, kind of development zones and this idea of even, sports as a vehicle for social emotional learning and all kinds of other skills for young athletes and their communities. Is there anything you want to add about the impact with PCA in kind of the sea change that you referenced earlier?
Well, you mentioned that sort of the blocking and tackling the things that need to get done. I think one of the smartest things we did was actually Rich Kelly played with Phil Jackson. He put me in touch with him, and Phil became our spokesman for our National Advisory Board. And I think a lot of people, when they came to our website, they saw all these incredible coaches and athletes who were supporting us. And I think that really made a difference. It didn't necessarily bring in more money or make operations more better, but it helped.
Yeah, awareness, certainly. Great. Well, I think that we are at time to shift towards audience Q&A. I have more questions to ask. Should there not be questions in the audience? But if anyone is interested to ask a question, please raise your hand, and we have people who will circulate with microphones. We have one up here. Thank you. Microphone's on its way.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for speaking to us today. My question is to Ned. So I'm very interested to hear how you approach lending to people in rural areas, especially when it comes to, people with very low incomes, essentially don't have money to pay. And so I assume it's very difficult to also have any recourse in case they don't. So what's your approach and perhaps what's next for d.light?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I mean, I've always taken a very human-centered approach, so we work very proactively in the communities that we work in. All of our salespeople and loan officers and service, they're all in the community. So we spend a lot of time co-developing really the products themselves with the customers. And I think that, as you kind of rightly allude to, the hardest piece is really cracking affordability. And I think that's been from the very start of how do we create products that are very affordable. Because, if we can fundamentally scale these kinds of solutions without need of subsidy, and if the market can work, then you can actually create a massively scalable solution. But it's very difficult to do when you have customers making $1 or $2 a day. But the reality, our case is that, our customers were all, or almost all for the most part, spending something already on energy, whether that was kerosene for their kerosene lantern, diesel for the diesel generator, or whatever they might use. So we'd figure out what is that amount that they're paying. And then how do we break the daily payments into something that's comparable or even less than what they're already paying? And they get a much better solution. And then once they pay off the product, they own it. So then the question becomes, how do you do that in a way where you can actually reliably collect? Because that's very challenging. These are unbanked customers. And that's something we really spend the last 10 years figuring out how to build. But at a very high level, the way the mechanism works is we have these products, they're pay-as-you-go enabled, which means the customer, they pay a deposit at the beginning. So they have to save up for the deposit, which might be about 10% of the product. But then they're paying 20 cents, 30 cents a day, something like that via mobile money. because mobile money is ubiquitous in the markets we work in. Even if they're unbanked, they'll have a mobile money account. And then basically it's like a prepaid utility. So they pay for it. If they pay, they get energy for the day. And if they make enough payments, it's unlocked permanently. So that kind of works with their cash flows. It's affordable to them because it's diverting payments it would make for a subpar solution into a much better solution. And at the end, they own their own power. And then after they made that payment, we can see what they can afford. And based on that, we can make them offerings. Well, if you keep paying that amount, now you can get refrigeration, TV. We can help keep upgrading their home. So it's a very kind of aspirational journey. And, our customers in these markets, that's generally how they build up their homes. So like even for furniture, they might buy a little piece of furniture first or build a part of the roof. So it kind of aligns with how they're used to paying for things. And it's fundamentally, I think it creates a very empowering relationship because at the end of the day, our customers are our boss. Like if we can't deliver good value for money, we don't get paid. We don't have, and if our products also don't work continuously, there's a quality problem. They don't pay. So I think it aligns the interests really well rather than having, a third party subsidy or kind of a nonprofit come in. Sometimes you need that for some sectors, like especially medical. So I'm not saying that model works everywhere, but in this case, because people were spending just on aggregate, it was like $38 billion a year is being spent on kerosene provided when we started. It's a tremendous amount going in there. So if we could divert some of that into something that's actually long-term sustainable, then, it can work. That's how we thought about it. But it has to come from looking at it from the customer's perspective first. And how do you make it work for them so it's like a wow for them and something that can really delight them? That's like kind of our fundamental guiding principle. And it's something that works economically for both of us.
Great. Sure. One more question. And I have a question for the event organizers. Do one clock here and another clock here. Which one do I follow? One more question. Okay. One more question. And then we're going to have closing comments. Okay. You're on.
Thanks. How do you think about the trade-off for any IP or trade secrets between sort of holding that within your organization versus trying to share that and the benefits that accrue to you and your investors and your mission, and you think you can do it best, keep it internally versus giving it away, scaling it, trying to find some other way to distribute it?
I can answer this. As a nonprofit, it's pretty easy for us. So our goal for system change is ultimately we want to be able to prove that family engagement works and get the proof points out there. And you can do that using technology. And then anyone else who wants to replicate it in a sustainable way, whether that is financially or kind of scale-wise, globally, you're welcome to. So I think that's our approach, but I think it's more enabled because of our governance structure as a 501c3.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And one that we've thought about recently, there was a small competitor who basically does what we do, but at a lower price with a cheaper product. And on the face of it, for our mission, that's awesome. More nonprofits getting access to this thing that we invented. It wasn't a category before we went in. And I remember we had a board meeting about it, and the board is like, oh, they're going up for sale. You should buy them. You should buy them so you can take their customers and then they'll be gone. And our board is primarily made of people who invest in like these huge SaaS companies, right? And we picked them because we really wanted them to push us to be the best, biggest company we could be. We wanted to be compared against the most fantastically successful companies out there. But that sentiment was like, oh, this is where some of the incentives might diverge a little bit. And so, I think Patrick and I talked about it, and we ultimately made the decision not to put a bid in for this company. And who knows, like 5-10 years down the line, maybe it'll bite us. But I think we believe that for us to even want to stay here, we have to keep inventing the next innovation that is really going to push nonprofits forward. And that's a big task because we have to catch lightning in a bottle like 8 times in a row in order to be as successful and big as we want to be. But we would rather work towards that than try and be myopic and only do the thing that we did really well and prevent anyone else from doing it. And maybe that's a losing strategy, but time will tell.
I'll add one thing on this because we've had a lot of internal sort of evolution on this topic, which is, initially we had some patents that we filed. It was more honestly to raise money. It was nice to put patents on we were ever planning to, we knew we couldn't really ever force them in Tanzania. It's just not going to happen. I think overall, we've really seen building defensibility in terms of building great customer relationships. Now we have all that customer data from the financing. These are things that are very hard to replicate or last mile distribution. So that's where we see the defensibility. It's not necessarily IP. We know that any tech IP eventually will get kind of copied over time, but we might get like kind of a window of advantage. The one thing that we do still enforce is, there are knockoffs that come into our market where they will pose as d.light products, but they're very bad quality. That we have to crack down on. But that's a little different from like an IP infringement issue that's more dishonestly.
Tell that why. Why do you do that?
Yeah.
Why do you crack down on them?
We crack down on them because then people think d.light products are not good quality. So it hurts, it hurts our brand. So we have to really be we have to really take a strong defensive position on protecting our brand and the quality brand that we built in these markets. Because rural customers, they are used to getting screwed by products that do not work. And building that trust has taken us years and years and years. So any company that tries to come in, it's like a fly-by-night basis, dump a bunch of stuff that's bad quality, slap the d.light brand on it because they know that'll sell. That makes me mad. So that's something we have to address and crack down on.
Okay, and we're getting pressure to wrap up. So I want to ask one last question of all of you. First of all, just to share with the group here, like what's ahead for you? And everyone in this room is positioned to help either you or your organizations or a student who is, at the beginning of their journey and could maybe provide the advice or the little kernel of funding or something that might make a difference. So closing words, will you kick us off, please, Heejae?
Sure. So our mission is to really get to the tipping point. And the tipping point for us is reach at least a third of the market that we see as 40 million kids. So you can help us do that in 3 ways.
How many million?
Right now we're at 5 and we need to triple that. So you can help us by telling your school district, if you're a parent, that you want to bring TalkingPoints to your school district. You can help us by finding great talent. Amazing talent has come from this community and we're always hiring. We're also recruiting for an advisory board and board of directors. We need to mobilize philanthropy. So if you know funders who are interested in educational equity or children, introduce us.
Jen?
When I stepped down as the CEO of Positive Coaching Alliance, I took a sabbatical. The board was gracious enough to pay me for a while. And I never had a sabbatical. The one thing I wanted to learn about was climate change. And I was like, I know it's pretty bad, but when I started looking at it, it's amazing how bad it is and how quickly it's coming. So what I would like everybody to do is act like the future of the world is dependent on fighting climate change, because it is.
Thank you. Len?
Yeah, we're, as a company, we're at a very interesting inflection point right now. We've been, like I said, 17 years, a lot of ups and downs, and but we've really achieved an interesting level of scale. And we're seeing just so many tailwinds for this stuff to, dramatically scale even further. I mean, we're at 180 million people. We believe there's a path to 1 billion people, impacted with these products. And we are aiming actually to kind of for this next chapter to do a listing in the next 18 to 24 months. It's a very new kind of journey for us. So I would say anyone who's had experience taking a company through that journey and not totally losing your soul or the company's soul in the process, I'd be very interested in talking with. And we're going to be getting one more round of financing to kind of help. It's kind of, I would say, supercharge our growth to get to that milestone. If there's anyone who has contacts there, I'd be very interested in talking with you about that.
Thank you, Nedjip. And Jenny.
Yeah, just 2 things. We just launched Estately, which is our brand selling estate planning into financial advisors. If any of you have a financial advisor, email me at jenny@freewill.com. We would love to talk to them about bringing estate planning into their practice and making it easier for their clients to donate to charity. And then the second thing is we have 2 roles open that are very GSB grad-esque. One of them is a GM role for that Estately line that I just talked about. It's been growing super fast, doubling month over month. So we need someone amazing to just take it to the moon. And then the second thing is we're hiring chief of staff. So anyone who's earlier in their career and just wants to be in front of the execs, in front of the board, really cut their teeth.
Wonderful. Please join me in thanking our panel.
I realized that I might have been too altruistic in what I said. Everybody get religion about climate change. I'm starting a new initiative combining sports and fighting climate change. And I'm probably as scared now as I was when I started Positive Coaching Alliance. If anybody's intrigued by that, please let me know. It's Jim at thisiswhatwedid.org.
Super. Thank you, Jim. Thanks, everybody.